What if I told you one of the most recognizable faces on television never even wanted to be an actor? Tom Selleck, the man with the legendary mustache and a career spanning over 5 decades, actually stumbled into Hollywood almost by accident. And yet this accidental detour would make him one of TV's biggest icons. But before fame, before the Hawaiian shirts of Magnum PI, Tom's life was ordinary, even humble. He was born in Detroit, Michigan in 1945, the middle child of a hard-working family. His father, Robert, was a carpenter who believed in discipline, while his mother, Martha, was the glue that held everyone together. The Sellecks weren't wealthy, but what they lacked in money they made up for in values: honesty, humility, and hard work. When Tom was still a boy, the family packed up and moved across the country to California, chasing opportunity. Growing up in the San Fernando Valley, Tom blended in easily. He wasn't the loud kid in class, and he definitely wasn't the one who dreamed of stardom. In fact, Tom's passion was sports. At 6'4", he was a natural athlete. Basketball became his ticket, earning him a scholarship to USC. If life had gone the way Tom planned, he probably would have stayed on the court, but destiny had other ideas. One day, while juggling college and part-time work to make ends meet, Tom was approached with something unexpected: modeling. At first, he brushed it off. Modeling didn't fit the tough, no-nonsense image he carried. But when the bills piled up, he gave it a shot. That single decision opened a door he never saw coming. Soon, small acting roles followed: commercials, bit parts, even game show appearances. Nothing huge, but enough to get Tom's face in front of cameras. Still, he wasn't convinced this was his future. Hollywood seemed more like a side hustle than a dream. And then came the rejections. Casting directors told him he was too tall, too rugged, or not polished enough. At one point, Tom considered walking away altogether. But then, in a twist of fate, a role came along that would change everything. By the late 1970s, Tom Selleck had been grinding in Hollywood for nearly a decade. He had appeared in dozens of small roles, commercials, and forgettable TV pilots that never made it past a single season. Most actors would have given up by then, but Tom's stubborn discipline, the same drive he had on the basketball court, kept him pushing forward. And then came the offer that would define his career: Magnum PI. At first glance, the show didn't even seem like a guaranteed hit. A detective in Hawaii, driving a flashy Ferrari, with a casual charm and a mustache that would become iconic? It sounded almost too unusual. But when Tom Selleck slipped into the role of Thomas Magnum, something clicked. Audiences didn't just watch him, they believed him. Magnum wasn't the typical TV detective of the time. He wasn't cold or brooding. He was relatable, funny, flawed, even vulnerable at times. And Selleck brought a charisma that no other actor could have matched. But here's what most people don't know. Tom almost lost the role before it even began. When he was first offered Magnum PI, Tom had also been cast in a little movie called Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's right, he was supposed to play Indiana Jones. The contract for Magnum forced him to choose, and because of scheduling conflicts, Selleck had to walk away from what would become one of the biggest movie franchises of all time. At the time, it felt like a devastating loss. Imagine being offered Indiana Jones and then being told you can't take it. But in hindsight, fate may have worked in his favor. While Harrison Ford became Indiana Jones, Tom Selleck made Magnum a household name. The role fit him perfectly, and the series ran for 8 successful seasons, earning him both critical acclaim and worldwide fame. Still, success came at a cost. The grueling filming schedule in Hawaii meant Selleck had little time for family, friends, or even personal happiness. He became one of TV's biggest stars, but privately, he struggled with the pressure of being everywhere at once. And just when the show was at its peak, Tom made a decision that shocked everyone. By the mid-1980s, Tom Selleck was one of the most recognizable faces in television. Magnum P.I. wasn't just a show, it was a cultural phenomenon. He had the fame, the money, and the attention that most actors dream about. But instead of riding that wave indefinitely, Selleck did something that stunned Hollywood. He walked away. When the 8th season wrapped, the network begged him to stay. Fans were devastated. Executives warned him that leaving a hit show at its peak was career suicide. But for Tom, the decision wasn't about ego or even money. It was about balance. Behind the scenes, Selleck had been craving something he couldn't buy: privacy, peace, and a sense of normalcy. The grueling pace of television left him little time to breathe, let alone build a life outside of the cameras. He wanted space to raise a family, to focus on his ranch, and to live without the constant spotlight. But stepping away from Magnum came with a heavy price. Hollywood is not kind to actors who step out of the limelight, and the transition from TV star to movie star is notoriously brutal. Tom tried to shift into film, but the industry wasn't waiting for him. He landed roles in movies like 3 Men and a Baby, which became a box office hit, but his film career never fully matched the highs of his television success. Some projects flopped, others never materialized. The very move he thought would give him more freedom ended up creating a new struggle: staying relevant in an industry that moves on quickly. For many actors, this would have been the end of the story: a rise, a peak, and a slow fade into obscurity. But Tom Selleck wasn't built that way, because just when Hollywood seemed ready to forget about him, he found a way to reinvent himself. After stepping away from Magnum P.I., Tom Selleck found himself in an unfamiliar position. Hollywood wasn't chasing him anymore. Casting directors had moved on to the next wave of stars, and the safe bet Selleck once represented seemed like a gamble now. But Tom has always been more than just his mustache and his Hawaiian shirts. Instead of chasing every opportunity, he became selective. He refused to play the Hollywood game of desperately clinging to fame. And while that might have slowed his momentum, it gave him something far more valuable: control. In the late 1980s and early 90s, he experimented. He took on roles in TV movies, guest spots, and even some romantic comedies. Some worked, others didn't. But he was testing the waters, figuring out where he fit in a changing industry. Then came 3 Men and a Baby, a surprise hit that proved he could still draw a crowd. The movie showed a different side of him, more comedic and family-oriented, and audiences loved it. For a moment, it looked like he was on the verge of a major film career. But again, Hollywood is unpredictable. The follow-up projects didn't match that same success, and his box office run quickly fizzled out. It would have been easy for Tom to accept the role of a faded star, living off his Magnum legacy. But he wasn't done yet. Instead, he started building a second act, one that would look completely different from his first. And that second act would come from a place most people didn't expect: a supporting role in a hit sitcom. Because Tom Selleck was about to surprise everyone on Friends. By the mid-90s, most people thought they already knew who Tom Selleck was. The Hawaiian shirts, the Ferrari, the Magnum mustache. It was a persona stamped into pop culture. But what they didn't expect was for Selleck to reinvent himself by stepping into one of the biggest sitcoms of all time. When Tom appeared on Friends in 1996 as Dr. Richard Burke, Monica's older, charming love interest, the reaction was immediate. Audiences who had grown up watching Magnum P.I. now saw him in a completely different light. And younger viewers who had never even heard of Magnum suddenly thought this new guy with the smooth voice and perfect mustache was kind of cool. The chemistry between Tom and Courtney Cox lit up the screen. Their storyline wasn't just filler, it was emotional, believable, and added real depth to the show. For many, Richard became one of the most memorable guest characters in Friends history. But beyond the laughs and romance, there was something bigger happening here. Tom Selleck wasn't just playing a role, he was reintroducing himself to Hollywood. He proved that he could still connect with a new generation, that he wasn't locked into the past, and that he had range far beyond the Magnum stereotype. In just a few episodes, Selleck reminded the world of his charisma, and it worked. His time on Friends reignited interest in his career, opening doors that many thought had closed for good. But what came next would push him into uncharted territory, a role that would define the later years of his career and prove that he still had the power to carry a show. Because Tom Selleck wasn't just making cameos anymore. He was about to take command again.
By the late 2000s, most actors from Tom Selleck's generation had quietly stepped away from the spotlight. Hollywood was obsessed with youth, superhero franchises, and big-budget blockbusters. Many wondered if Selleck had finally had his run. But in 2010, he made a bold move, stepping into a role that would become one of the defining parts of his career. Tom became Frank Reagan, the stoic yet deeply human police commissioner in Blue Bloods. The show wasn't flashy. It wasn't filled with explosions or gimmicks. Instead, it focused on family, tradition, and moral dilemmas in modern-day New York City. And against all odds, it worked. Week after week, viewers tuned in, not just for the crime-solving, but for the Reagan family dinners, the loyalty, and the sense of integrity Tom brought to the role. He wasn't playing a cop. He was embodying a leader, a father, and a man struggling to balance justice with compassion. What made Blue Bloods even more remarkable was its staying power. While other shows came and went, this one quietly built a loyal following. And at the center of it all was Selleck, older now, grayer, but commanding the screen with a presence that no one could ignore. It was the ultimate comeback story. Tom Selleck didn't just return to television. He proved he still had what it took to lead a primetime drama for over a decade. And yet behind the cameras, there was a side of Selleck that viewers didn't always see. A side filled with struggles, tough decisions, and the price of staying true to himself in an industry that constantly demanded more. Because while Blue Bloods secured his place as a legend, Tom's personal life told an even more powerful story.
Fame can be intoxicating. For many actors, the lights, the attention, and the adoration become impossible to give up. But Tom Selleck, he walked a very different path. In 1987, at the height of his Magnum PI fame, Tom made a decision that stunned Hollywood. He stepped away. Not because the roles dried up, not because his star was fading, but because he wanted something most celebrities struggled to hold on to, a real family life. Selleck married British actress Jillie Mack, and together they built a life far from the noise of Hollywood. Instead of chasing the next big role, he bought a ranch in Ventura County, California. There, surrounded by horses, fields, and quiet, Tom focused on raising his daughter Hannah. This wasn't the Hollywood lifestyle anyone expected. While other stars were making headlines for wild parties or high-profile scandals, Selleck was busy fixing fences, riding horses, and cherishing family dinners. It wasn't always easy. Taking a step back from acting meant turning down opportunities. And in Hollywood, opportunities don't wait forever. But Tom knew the trade-off was worth it. Years later, he admitted that walking away from the spotlight was the key to his happiness. He said, "I've found it's important to nurture your relationships. You can't just live for Hollywood." And it worked. While many of his peers saw their personal lives fall apart under the weight of fame, Selleck quietly built a strong marriage that has lasted for decades. In an industry notorious for broken families, Tom became the exception. But the choice to prioritize family over fame didn't just protect his personal life, it gave him something even rarer: peace. Yet, even with his quiet life on the ranch, the world kept pulling Tom Selleck back. Hollywood still wanted him, and fans never stopped asking for more. Which brings us to the final chapter of his story, the legacy of a man who redefined what it meant to be a star.
Tom Selleck is more than just an actor. He's a symbol of a different kind of Hollywood. One where integrity, humility, and staying true to yourself matter more than fame. Think about it. How many stars from the 1980s can you name who are still respected, still admired, and still working today without a single major scandal attached to their name? The list is short, and Selleck's name is right at the top. His mustache became legendary. His role as Magnum set a new standard for TV heroes. And his later success with Blue Bloods proved he wasn't just a one-hit wonder. He could adapt, evolve, and still capture the hearts of millions decades later. But perhaps Tom's greatest legacy isn't on the screen at all. It's the life he built off-screen, a life grounded in values, family, and authenticity. In an industry that often chews people up and spits them out, he found a way to keep his soul intact. That's why Tom Selleck remains so beloved. Not because he was the flashiest, not because he chased fame at all costs, but because he chose balance. He chose to live as much for himself and his family as he did for the audience. And in doing so, he left behind a blueprint for what real success looks like. Not just the roles you play, but the person you are when the cameras stop rolling.